Hello and welcome to this Morpheus Tech Brief on what's new in Morpheus 7.0. I'm Martez Reed, Director of Technical Marketing with Morpheus Data. There's a couple of things to walk through the Morpheus platform to set the stage for walking through the new features capability within this latest release of the Morpheus platform. Morpheus platform looks to simplify IT complexity in large enterprise environments and service provider environments. The focus of the platform is on a couple of key areas of capability. The first one is the hybrid cloud management functionality within the Morpheus platform. It's the ability to be able to integrate or tie into on-prem hypervisors like VMware, OpenStack, Nutanix, public clouds like AWS, Azure, GCP, and a handful of others to automate and orchestrate the end-to-end provisioning process, the decommissioning process, as well as self-service management for day two operations. Platform also has the ability to be able to tie into solutions like Kubernetes for container management to be able to help facilitate the deployment of Kubernetes clusters utilizing native automation functionality within the platform, or being able to deploy cloud managed Kubernetes offerings like AKS, EKS, as well as GKE. The platform supports the ability to be able to integrate with infrastructure automation. This falls into two categories: infrastructure as code via capabilities like Terraform, CloudFormation, or ARM templates to be able to model out that infrastructure and deploy it in a self-service fashion. And then the ability to be able to tie into configuration management solutions like Chef, Ansible, Puppet to be able to integrate that automation into the lifecycle of VM-based workloads. And then finally, in large organizations, there's a need for IT service management. So being able to integrate with things like change management for approvals, as well as ticketing to be able to provide that end-to-end solution for a given environment. So one quick note as we walk through new releases in the Morpheus platform, there have been changes in the release schedule for the Morpheus platform, specifically related to the removal of what we used to term as the standard branch of the Morpheus platform. So moving forward from 7.0, there will no longer be a standard release of the Morpheus platform. So for those that are familiar with previous releases of the platform, as an example, leading up to 7.0, there was a 6.3 release of the Morpheus platform, which was the standard release track of the platform. So moving forward, there will only be LTS releases of the Morpheus platform, and those will be released every 6 months or so. So as an example, 7.0 was released in March, and the anticipation is that 7.2 of the Morpheus platform will be released in the September timeframe of this year. So those will include 24 months of support for the release of the LTS platform. So before we jump into what's new in 7.0, let's do a quick recap of what was presented in the 6.2 LTS from a major functionality standpoint. So one of the major enhancements to 6.2 was the introduction of the configuration import and export capability. So the ability to be able to define certain Morpheus objects to be exported or imported from a configuration perspective. So this would allow the ability to be able to, as an example, export a automation workflow, its configuration to a Git repository, and then utilize that to be able to then sync that same automation workflow into a different environment or the same environment, utilizing that for essentially configuration as code. Additionally, the form builder capability was added into the Morpheus platform. So that is the ability to be able to leverage a more robust capability to be able to create service catalog items within the Morpheus platform, similar to as what we see here on this particular slide, to be able to model out more complex constructs, such as things like key value pairs, disk, networks, all those things that were not previously available in the existing catalog creator. So not only does it provide a more robust ability to be able to model that out and present that to an end user, whoever that might be, it also includes a more enhanced experience for the Morpheus administrator that is creating those catalog items to be able to have many of those constructs or objects in a single place, i.e. the form builder, as we refer to it as, to be able to not only create the catalog item, but to create inputs or option types dynamically in that same interface to avoid essentially jumping back and forth between multiple places in the Morpheus platform to build a catalog item. And then finally, AWS All Regions support was added. So now there's the ability to be able to create a AWS cloud in the Morpheus platform. And instead of tying that to a specific or individual region in AWS, there's the ability to select all regions to be able to take advantage of that capability. So now with the recap of 6.2 over, let's delve into what's new in the 7.0 release of the Morpheus platform. There have been a number of core platform updates that have been made to the Morpheus platform itself. So the enhancement or extension of object labels. So object labels in the Morpheus platform have been applied to various constructs or objects in the platform. So things like automation tasks, workflows, instances, various Morpheus objects. Those are used to be able to categorize or classify those objects. And so being able to filter based upon that data, utilizing the Morpheus UI or the REST API to be able to specify that. One of the benefits of the object labels, particularly as it relates to instances that was added, was the ability to be able to leverage those labels for dynamic automation targeting within the Morpheus platform. So being able to associate a label or labels to an instance, and then being able to reference that piece of metadata when you define an automation task, in which that allows you to be able to execute the automation task against instances that have a specific label to be able to target those in a dynamic fashion, as opposed to individually specifying instance 1, instance 2, instance 3. You might be able to specify, I want, let's say, patch group 1 or production, or insert your given piece of arbitrary metadata of choice to be able to target those workloads. Object labels have now been added to groups as well as clouds for the ability to be able to categorize and classify those Morpheus constructs within the Morpheus platform, either via the REST API or utilizing the Morpheus UI. Enhancements have also been made to the distributed worker within the Morpheus platform. So the distributed worker in the Morpheus platform is utilized to be able to facilitate a distributed architecture of the Morpheus platform. So that allows the ability to be able to allow the platform to integrate or talk to environments that are geographically distributed and do not necessarily have the network connectivity that would easily facilitate the central Morpheus platform communicating with a given environment. As an example, there may be a Morpheus deployment in a given cloud environment, AWS, Azure, GCP, and there may be a need to be able to integrate or interact with a data center that may not be directly network connected to that particular cloud. And so as opposed to the Morpheus platform having to reach into that cloud environment and opening up a firewall port to be able to specify that, this would allow, the distributed worker allows the ability to be able to install the distributed worker component into that distributed environment, similar to ServiceNow's mid server from an architectural standpoint. The distributed worker then initiates an outbound connection from the environment to the central Morpheus platform to establish a connection that then allows the Morpheus platform to be able to, as an example, provision into that distributed environment. So a number of enhancements have been made there. One of them is the ability to be able to relay agent communications for that particular site through the distributed worker that sits in that environment. So as opposed to each of the machines that have the Morpheus agent needing to talk directly back to the central Morpheus platform itself, there's the ability to be able to specify that they should go through that distributed worker as an endpoint to essentially funnel that traffic up through the distributed worker's connection to the Morpheus platform. Additionally, there's the ability to be able to deploy the distributed worker at a given site in a highly available fashion to avoid a single point of failure for that given environment or site. Continue to look at some more core platform updates. There have been some new instance RBAC permissions that have been added into the Morpheus platform, a couple related to some of the enhancements that were made in previous versions, such as the ability to retry automation tasks against instances that have failed, as well as the ability to handle that for cancellations as well. And then finally, the ability to be able to have a permission associated with expiration extensions. So when a policy has been defined for a given instance to expire that particular workload. The default landing page has had a permission or essentially a new mechanism that has been added to override the default homepage for the Morpheus platform. So for those that have utilized Morpheus, you know that when you come into the platform, you're dropped into the default home dashboard for the Morpheus platform. There have been scenarios in which customer like the ability to be able to toggle that to something else. Let's say, as an example, they want the default to be instances. For when a user logs in, they want them to be placed or dropped into the instances page as opposed to the home dashboard. And so there's the ability now to define this when you create a role or modify a role to specify what page in the Morpheus platform that I want that given role to be dropped into by default. And then another thing that was added in the 7.00 release of the Morpheus platform was the addition of the ability to export or import forms within the Morpheus platform. So we talked about the form builder that was added in the 6.2 release of the Morpheus platform. So this supports the ability to be able to import and export forms within the platform. Some hybrid cloud updates. So the platform has support for deploying workloads into VMware vSphere environments. One of the exciting things that was added was the ability to be able to define OVF properties for workloads deployed into VMware environments. So typically OVF or an OVA is going to be utilized when you need to deploy an appliance. So let's say, as an example, it's a load balancer or something like VMware vSphere or vCenter in particular is an OVA or OVF appliance. When you go to deploy those through vSphere natively, you'll be prompted with questions or certain property fields that need to be filled in that specify the configuration for that appliance. So that allows that appliance to be automated from a configuration perspective through that mechanism of deployment. So the Morpheus platform now supports the ability to be able to do that in a dynamic fashion, in which I can specify a given node type within the Morpheus platform that I want to then have the capability to associate data with. So in this example that I have on this particular slide, I utilized a Fedora CoreOS OVA appliance, in which case it required two pieces of data that needed to be passed to the OVF properties. It was the particular encoding as well as a data payload. So the encoding, I specified that I want it to be a static value, but I leveraged Morpheus's custom option capability to be able to dynamically define, in this case, what's termed as the ignition configuration. So this would allow me the ability to be able to dynamically specify various pieces of data that should be passed to a particular OVA during its deployment. So I got a question. Are the new import-export features usable via API so that forms can be developed on a non-production environment and then Morpheus programmatically be promoted to a prod environment? It's a good question. I believe the import-export capability is not yet exposed via the API. So the best place to check would be the API documentation for Morpheus, which I believe is api.docs.morpheusdata.com. If it is not available there, then it is currently not available yet. It's a great question. So continuing on with some of the hybrid cloud updates. Platform added support for vSphere content library version templates. So the vSphere content library capability within vSphere has a number of benefits. And one of the things they added not too long ago was versioning for those templates. So now this allows the ability for Morpheus to be able to integrate with that capability for its base images within the Morpheus platform. And then finally, from a VMware standpoint, there's now the ability to be able to sync in network tags into the Morpheus platform, which is going to allow that data to be utilized for network selection within the Morpheus platform. There's a number of container updates within the Morpheus platform itself. One of the ones that was added was the ability to be able to do a couple of things. So now when you come into the Morpheus platform and you want to create a new cluster, so in this case, could be AKS, EKS, GKE, could be a Kubernetes cluster within the Morpheus platform. Previously, when you click the Add Cluster button, there was a drop down that appeared underneath the button. Now what it actually does is it opens a modal within the UI, similar to if you were to provision an instance within the platform. So it provides a consistency within the platform. The other thing that was added, which is really exciting, is the ability to be able to specify, utilizing RBAC permissions, which cluster types should be presented or available to a given user. So as an example, in my environment, if I don't want my users or customers to be able to deploy a GKE cluster, because maybe we don't use Google or GCP, I don't want that to appear. So now there's the ability to be able to toggle which of these cluster types are available utilizing a new RBAC capability within the platform. So to be similar to what was added not too long ago for task and workflows. So there's a new section in the RBAC permissions for cluster types, essentially, where I can toggle those on and off within the platform. K8's cluster packages. So the Morpheus platform has the ability to be able to bundle up what we term as spec templates. So essentially it could be Kubernetes manifest. And so what is now available is the ability to be able to define custom cluster packages. So let's say as an example, I want to deploy Prometheus or HashiCorp console or Istio or insert Kubernetes application or solution of choice. I want to package that up or bundle that up into a package and then be able to add that to a cluster, either during provisioning or after the fact, and manage that. I now have the ability to be able to define that. So there's a new section in the Morpheus platform for creating cluster packages similar to those that have been available for the native Morpheus Kubernetes distribution MKS, things like Rook, Prometheus, and several others. So a couple of questions came through. Can we create clusters through catalog items? So it's a great question. At the moment, that cannot be done natively. So there's not the ability to natively specify, I want to create a catalog item that is based on a cluster. At the moment, the way that it could be done is by creating a catalog item that is backed by an operational workflow. And the operational workflow then references the Morpheus REST API to then create the cluster on the back end. That would be the mechanism at the moment that it could be done. It could also be done via an XaaS instance to add a stateful component or capability specifically to the automation, in which I could reference that from a initial deployment standpoint, but also have things like configuration as well as decommissioning operations associated with that particular object. Great question. So there's another question that came through: is RHOCP also supported? So RHOCP, I'm going to assume, is Red Hat OpenShift platform. So at the moment, Red Hat, as well as other third-party distributions, would be supported through the platform's external Kubernetes cluster support. So the ability to be able to attach to an existing Kubernetes cluster via the Kubernetes API to be able to model out and visualize those objects within those given Kubernetes clusters. Another thing that has commonly been done is leveraging the platform's capabilities to be able to define what we would term as a custom Kubernetes cluster layout to be able to leverage the platform's hooks into hypervisors, as well as public clouds to be able to provision the workloads, obviously take advantage of the integrations with IPAM, DNS, CMDB to orchestrate that full end-to-end VM provisioning process, and then leverage automation via something like Ansible or Bash to be able to orchestrate the deployment of a given cluster onto that environment. Also supports the ability to be able to reference things like APIs that might be necessary to model that out, to build out a third-party Kubernetes cluster, leveraging the platform's underlying tooling. Great question. So another follow-up question is, does the integration provide the ability to tie into Red Hat OpenShift so that they can manage all of the clusters from one place? So the platform is going to provide the ability to be able to essentially aggregate or centralize all the various clusters in the platform. So when I come into the infrastructure cluster section of the Morpheus UI, I can see all the various clusters that have been added. So there would be the ability to be able to add each of those Red Hat OpenShift clusters into the Morpheus platform, and then at which point you'd be able to come into the Morpheus UI and see all of those clusters that have been added and be able to interact with them to the varying degree of capability that the Morpheus platform is going to support for those external clusters. So another question, are labels now available to be referenced in input option list request scripts? That is a great question. That I do not know the answer to. So that'd be a great question to post into the discussion forum to get a broader group of feedback. So discuss.morpheusdata.com would be a great place to put that. All right, let's keep it going. As I said, any other questions, feel free to post it in the Q&A, and I'll look to go through it. So following up on some of the container updates, MKS agent-based communications. So as I said, the Morpheus platform does include a CNCF conformant Kubernetes distribution out of the box. And one of the things that has been added is the ability to leverage the Morpheus agent command bus on that particular host or systems to be able to facilitate the communication with the Kubernetes API server. So this addresses situations in which there is the need to have Morpheus platform not directly communicate from a network perspective with the Kubernetes API. Oftentimes it's for security reasons in which I don't want to grant Morpheus access to directly hit the Kubernetes API in that environment because it's been firewalled off. And so since there is a Morpheus agent that has been deployed onto that particular host, the ability to be able to leverage the essentially bidirectional communication capability of the Morpheus agent, in which the Morpheus agent is going to reach out to the central Morpheus platform. So that avoids the firewall needing to be opened up inbound, but also that channel is going to allow the ability to be able to execute commands on that particular host or host without the need for that firewall to be open. And so the mechanism allows it to use that channel for communication with the Kubernetes API, as opposed to hitting the externally referenced Kubernetes API via the network. All right, so we got another question. How easy is it to deploy bare metal Kubernetes clusters? Question is, add new nodes to existing cluster with Morpheus. So platform supports bare metal integration via solutions like canonical mass. And so within the platform, what would happen is the need to be able to create a custom Kubernetes cluster layout, and you could base the cluster on the canonical mass node types that are being presented through the Morpheus platform. So that would allow the ability to be able to leverage the platform's integration with canonical mass to be able to build out those bare metal Kubernetes clusters. One thing to keep in mind, particularly as it relates to bare metal Kubernetes deployments, is that there's often a desire for the control plane itself from a Kubernetes cluster perspective to not consume bare metal hosts themselves. And so at the moment, the platform does not have the capability to be able to define or, in essence, mix and match node types within a single cluster. So what I mean by that is you don't have the ability to be able to define, let's say, the control plane running in virtual machines, and then the workers being defined on bare metal. At this moment is an all or nothing scenario. So in which you wanted to facilitate a bare metal deployment, you would need essentially, as an example for an HA type cluster, at minimum 6 physical hosts, 3 for the control plane, and then 3 for the workers to run on the bare metal environment. Then at which point you would go to add new workers in a similar fashion as you would do via virtual machines, and Morpheus would leverage the canonical mass integration to be able to facilitate adding those new worker nodes to the Kubernetes cluster. Been a number of automation updates. So over the last handful of releases, particularly with 6.0, there were a number of updates and enhancements to the automation engine within the Morpheus platform. Number of those have been exposed in 7.0, such as conditional workflow execution. So there's now a new task type within the Morpheus platform for what would be termed as conditional workflows, or you might see it as if else. Essentially, what it's going to do is provide the ability to be able to specify that I want to leverage essentially 2 different paths for the execution of subsequent automation. So say as an example, I wanted to build out some automation and I needed to essentially perform a conditional piece of logic, such as an if else. If a certain event or response happens, I want to go down path A. And if not, I want to go down path B. So this is going to allow and offer that ability to be able to define those within the Morpheus platform for some advanced orchestration for specific tasks. And then finally, in many ways, jointed with that is a new flag for continual error. Oftentimes, there are a number of tasks that you want to run and execute, but ultimately you're not quite concerned about the outcome of that particular task. So as an example, if I did want to tie into a conditional workflow and then leverage something like the output response of a given previous task to make a decision about which path I should go down, I may need to specify that I want to continue on error for that task, because what I really want to do is I want to evaluate the output of that task and then make a decision about which path I should head down for the subsequent execution of that workflow. All right, so that's going to cover what's new in 7.0 of the Morpheus platform. Certainly been quite a number of updates. Definitely appreciate all the questions, and thank everyone for joining this Morpheus Tech Brief.